team, thanks for participating this afternoon. Thanks for taking time out. I'm sure you guys are very busy. I speculate you may be on the verge of finals or already in final season. We really appreciate you sharing time with us today. It's also great to see a team from upstate New York. If I recall, Marist is in upstate New York. Remember correctly? Really good. I went to undergrad in Rochester. Anyway, today, my name is Kevin Harrington. I'm R&D Director in Urology and Critical Care at Becton Dickinson. I work in Atlanta, Georgia. We'll let the other judges introduce themselves, and then I'll go ahead and go through instructions. Thanks.
I can go ahead and start if you want. Sorry, I'm talking over somebody. My name is Jessica Druwski. I also have been on both sides of this competition. I went to the University of St. Thomas for my JD MBA and participated in this competition around about 2014, I think. I now live in Seattle and I work at Google in a risk and compliance role where we do audits of our suppliers to be sure they're adhering to the Google Supplier Code of Conduct. So that's me. I'll pass it off to the other judges.
So I'm Alison Taunton Rigby, and this is my second year doing some judging. I'm on the Bentley College, Bentley University Ethics Advisory Board. My background is healthcare, life sciences, financial services, more specifically the biotech industry. And I currently sit on a number of boards, and I'm in Boston, great city.
Yes, and I will pick that torch up. Boston is a great city. That is where I am. I went to undergrad at Mount Holyoke College, where I majored in philosophy and economics, and I had the pleasure of participating in IBEC. And we actually had our competition on the Santa Monica boardwalk. It was a wonderful time pre-pandemic. And now I'm in law school, my second year, as I've mentioned, at Northeastern University, which has a co-op program. So I've had the opportunity to work at Thornton Law Firm doing SEC whistleblowing regulation. And I am headed to BNY Mellon in their compliance group this summer to keep up the ethics perspective of it. So thank you for having us.
So really good. I'm going to go ahead and go through instructions for the full presentation portion. I will also keep time during the session. I remind judges until I let folks know, we'll stay in character throughout today's full presentation. So in this part of the competition, you are taking on a fictional business identity and assigning a fictional business identity to the judges. Please make sure everyone knows who you are and who they are before you begin. You will have 25 minutes with a 5-minute cushion to describe the legal, financial, and ethical dimensions of the problem and to recommend a solution that passes muster on all 3 counts: legal, financial, and ethical. During this time, teams will be uninterrupted. When you're finished, the judges will ask questions for about 20 minutes. During the Q&A, both you and the judges will continue to stay in character. After the Q&A, judges will give you feedback outside of the role play, and I'll let folks know when that moment comes. Some important things to keep in mind. The ethical aspects of your analysis are the most important. However, these should be described in a simple, practical, and common sense fashion, using technical, philosophical terminology, or basing your argument on religious or theological grounds will be considered a serious weakness. During this presentation, every member of the team must have some sort of speaking role. First of all, for the Marist team, any questions for us before we begin? Okay, very good. Go ahead and begin. I'll keep time. Thank you.
Before we start, is everyone able to see my screen?
We are.
Yes.
Yes, thanks.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. We are the Marist College Undergraduate Consulting Group here to address you, the Board of Directors, regarding the ethical lapses in Amazon's employment for our presentation titled Amazon Not in Its Prime. Today, we have laid out the presentation into 3 segments: legal, financial, and ethical. I will now hand it over to Emma to address our problem statement.
We have identified Amazon's problem statement to be that despite working hard to deliver excellence to customers, Amazon also has an ethical responsibility to take better care of its growing base of workers. Even as Amazon has continued to grow and succeed in recent fiscal years, they are doing so on the backs of their employees, which is exploitative without proper compensation and care. Although Amazon has other ethical lapses, we chose to focus most closely on the issues pertaining to the way the company treats their employees. I will now pass it back over to Hi'ilei to discuss the legal component.
So first, before we head into that, we want to talk about recent headlines and articles that have followed Amazon workers and their process towards unionization in various locations. So workers of JFK 8 in Staten Island made history, becoming the largest group to unionize in the last decade. Employees from other cities, such as those in Atlanta, were unsuccessful in their pursuit to unionize. This is a movement for job security, union pay, better working conditions, power, and dignity. The success of JFK 8 made other workers around the country hopeful that they too will soon follow and unionize. We just want to emphasize the implication that follows a group unionizing. People do not normally unionize when they're happy, so this is a strong indicator that employees are eager for change and unhappy with current conditions. So moving forward, we have outlined the legal component of our presentation as follows. First, providing recent filings of class action lawsuits, specifically in regard to its employees. Next, introducing other claims and legal violations. And lastly, how Amazon should proceed with addressing and ameliorating these issues. So looking at the class action lawsuits filed. So in regard to its employees, Amazon has been known to lack the resources and care that should be allocated towards its workers, especially in distribution facilities and warehouses. Tragically, 6 employees had died in Illinois after a tornado had caused an Amazon facility to collapse. After further investigation, it was discovered that the building had not been built to code or meeting requirements, and emergency evacuations and shelter were not in place. So despite the warning of hazardous weather, employees were still expected to work and remain at their positions until it was too late. So next, looking at culture. Amazon has been accused of multiple accounts regarding harassment within the workplace, employees, including sellers on the site, facing discrimination. And lastly, Amazon has failed to meet basic legal requirements when paying or given compensation to employees. So looking at a fulfillment center in Pennsylvania, employees were not being paid on time and they weren't even being paid minimum wage. Also, their relay drivers, they weren't being reimbursed for the missed meals and breaks. So moving on, pictured is a timeline aside from those dealing with employees of other filings within the past 8 months, looking at privacy violations, recollection of hazardous products, antitrust violations, marking up prices on competing sites, and including patent and trademark infringement. So again, while this presentation focuses predominantly on labor issues, these are other prevalent legal actions taken towards the company. So first looking at, again, reiterating patent and trademark infringement filed by 4 different companies, including Apple, the recollection of various products that had, for example, heavy metals and spices, or the distribution of defective lithium batteries, or flammable children's robes, and even mattresses. And then last, their antitrust violations. So basically barring these third-party sellers from selling products elsewhere, and then making prices more expensive on competing sites. So moving forward, what can Amazon as a corporation do to prevent the constant filing of class action lawsuits or address the current ones on file, especially in regards to their employees? First, they really need to standardize and put in place ethical frameworks. So basically meeting these needs of employees at the bare minimum, enforcing that management pays their employees, giving them ample breaks and meals, having emergency plans in place in hazardous areas, prioritizing the health and safety of the well-being of employees at the forefront. Next, honor user and employee privacy and not using both the users and employees' personal information and selling that to other parties. And then adhering to just general requirements when conducting businesses overseas. Again, monitoring products that are being sold and making sure that they meet basic industry standards. And lastly, just maintaining transparency. So again, this is just the bare minimum, and this just shows that Amazon is not attaining the minimum ethical responsibility as a corporation. So now I'll pass it back to Emma, who will highlight the company's current financial standing.
Looking into the financial component of our research, we were able to break down Amazon's finances into 3 pieces: their financial standing, market share, and then growth and unionization. Starting with Amazon's financial performance and standing, it is overall very clear that they experienced a lot of growth in 2020 due to the pandemic, in which consumers were ordering out of necessity a lot more online than they ever had before. This should be noted as some of the change between fiscal years 2020 and 2021 appear to be negative, but rather that is due to the unprecedented growth experienced between 2019 and 2020. Despite this, revenue has grown over the past 3 years, and we wanted to break down and specifically look at the revenue coming from online stores. Amazon does have other streams of revenue, but we wanted to look at that coming from online stores specifically, as we felt as that most closely matriculates to the expenses being incurred in fulfillment and warehouse centers. We also note that the operating margin has been relatively steady, and free cash flow and return on invested capital were growing pre-pandemic, which is a healthy look. We also chose to look at the fulfillment expense. And this is because on the 10K, fulfillment expense was defined as fulfillment costs, primarily consisting of those that were incurred in operating and staffing the North America fulfillment centers, and etc. It should be noted that there was no specific line item on the 10K directly relating to wage and labor expenses. Something we really noted is that fulfillment expenses are not growing as quickly as those revenue growth, especially taking into account the fact that the number of employees has also been growing over the past 3 years, which currently sits at 1.6 million. So this again is a glaring indicator at the lack of financial resources being devoted to employees. We then chose to look at market share. So this chart over on the right shows the global market share for e-commerce companies based on GMV, which is the gross merchandise value. And it is clear that their largest competitor is Alibaba, which is an e-commerce company based mostly out of China. And this is clear that Amazon is very focused, and as we'll continue to touch upon throughout the presentation, that they are mainly focused on their competitive advantage and competitive edge, rather than looking at the core element of their business, which is those that are able to facilitate this growth, which is their employees. We then wanted to circle back and look at their growth and unionization again. So we first wanted to note the increase in Prime and membership fees that happened pretty recently. So there was an increase in $20 a year on Prime membership fees. They were in the past $119 a year and have now since increased to $139. I know we're seeing this across multiple subscription platforms, with Netflix also increasing their membership fees, but it's notable for Amazon in that these increases will actually result in a rough estimate of $4 billion revenue growth from just the Prime memberships, based on a calculation of over 200 million active Prime members, showing again that they will continue to have a lot of revenue growth coming in, again, showing that ability to really enhance the money going towards their employees. Again, we wanted to reiterate that large growth in fiscal year 2020. A lot of companies suffered during the pandemic. However, They did not. They experienced 38% revenue growth and 68% free cash flow growth. They were succeeding in this financial growth on the backs of their employees, who were having to put themselves in danger by working through a global pandemic. And again, those individuals really being the ones able to facilitate the growth, ensuring doing so dangerously that us as consumers were able to order and have our packages fulfilled and delivered in a timely manner, which really contributed to society being able to run smoothly during the pandemic. And then touching upon that unionization in April 2022 from a financial standpoint, as we touched upon earlier, Amazon workers in Staten Island did recently unionize, and it is important to note just how much Amazon did not want this to happen. They actually spent $4.3 million in anti-union efforts in 2021 alone. And there's a bunch of reasons as to why they would not want unionization to occur. One being the rise in labor costs that come with unionization. For an example, that group in Staten Island, one of their demands does include an increase to a minimum wage of $30 an hour for employees. And furthermore, from a PR standpoint, it is not a good look on the company. And we really feel as though it would have been more efficient for Amazon to address the employee malpractices from the beginning, rather than running the risk of having their employees unionize. Although it is just one part of the country so far that has taken this action, Amazon should see this as a threat, as other parts of the country and other fulfillment centers may be inspired and continue to take action, and we might see unionization in other parts as well. Again, these three components really just make it apparent that Amazon does have the capacity to invest and make more money into enhancing their employees' working conditions, and that they should and need to. I will now pass it on to Max to discuss the ethical component of our presentation.
So our ethical component of our presentation will touch into three areas, specifically the treatment of employees, worker safety, and then finally temporary employment. So first, for the treatment of employees, it must be noted that Amazon has an unusually high turnover rate. It's about 150% a year, which comes out to about 3% a week. Amazon has seen this high turnover as actually a good thing. Bezos really wanted turnover. He was afraid of a stagnant workforce, which he would call a march to mediocrity. Turnover is almost built into the system at Amazon. Bezos held a theory that workers would expect raises, but at the same time, they became complacent. They didn't work as hard. Consequently, wages would increase while productivity would decline. And Bezos' solution to this was to replace workers before the productivity further deteriorated and pay increased. He said it was more efficient to hire fresh, new people. And so Amazon was basically encouraging people to leave at this point. After 3 years on the job, hourly workers no longer received automatic raises, but instead the company offered bonuses to people who quit. It also limited upward mobility for hourly workers, preferring to hire managers from the outside. Another issue with regards to the treatment of employees is surrounded around paychecks. Amazon has been shortchanging workers on their paychecks. An Oklahoma Amazon warehouse worker named Tara Jones was a single mom with a baby, and her check was $90 short of what it should have been. She wrote an email to Jeff Bezos and to the company in which she got no response. During periods of record profit, Amazon was shortchanging specifically new parents, patients dealing with medical crises, and other vulnerable workers in the fulfillment centers. And then a lot of these paycheck mishaps were due to questionable payroll software. It's as many as 179 of the company's warehouses have been affected, besides this one specifically in Oklahoma. And then as a result, fulfillment workers in their warehouses have stopped disability payments, cars repossessed, and other detrimental financial consequences as a result. The investigation indicated that workers at facilities across the country had to contend again with questionable payroll software that led people with medical problems and other life crises having been fired when attendance software mistakenly marked them as no-shows. So even though they were showing up for work, the software was marking them as being absent. This could have been due to doctor's appointments and other factors. There was no record of doctor's notes that they've handed in. and they struggled to reach their case managers and other HR people who supported them, and oftentimes had phone calls that led to nowhere and got no help. Again, going off the treatment of employees, there have been many complaints from employees at Amazon fulfillment centers and warehouses. It said that they're giving backbreaking tasks over intrusive surveillance technologies, such as automated tracking systems and cameras that monitor their every move. There's fear that they don't meet specific quotas, most of the time unrealistic quotas, that they will be fired. Ultimately, it comes down to that they are working in fear. This has led workers calling for a union, like Heli has mentioned before, and a union drive in Alabama was attempted, but did not succeed. As a solution, Amazon introduced a well-being program called Amazon, and the idea was to guide employees through mindfulness practices in their warehouses. It included short videos featuring easy to follow well-being activities, such as guided meditations and positive affirmations. However, the rollout did not go as planned, and it was not well received by the fulfillment and warehouse workers. Lastly, worker safety. During the past 3 years at one of the Amazon sites, an ambulance was called 115 times. The workers at Amazon warehouses across the nation have long complained about grueling working conditions. They say they have too few bathroom breaks, which are all timed, excessive productivity goals, and unsafe working environments. The pandemic, the workers claim, have only increased the problems as more people have turned to home delivery services. In 2019, Amazon workers protested working conditions, in which they walked out claiming inhumane working conditions on Amazon Prime Day. Amazon's response to this, amid the concerns around COVID-19, is they say that these accusations are simply unfounded. They believe that they have taken extreme measures to keep people safe, tripling down on deep cleaning, supplying safety supplies that are available, and changing processes to ensure that those in their buildings are kept safe distances. They've also raised pay by $2 an hour for a very short period during the COVID-19 pandemic. It is important to note also that Amazon warehouses were on a list of the most dangerous places to work in the United States during early 2018.
So picking up where Max left off, we've already touched on worker safety and worker treatment, but another key area where Amazon struggles is in their worker policy, more specifically temporary employment. So by outsourcing and partnering with temporary staffing agencies and utilizing independent contractors, Amazon is actually able to shirk the many benefits that it offers its own full-time and in-house employees. What this means for those temporary workers is no benefits, no job security because temporary staff is typically let go of within 90 days. Additionally, this staff is often treated differently despite the fact that they work at the same locations, same warehouses, complete identical tasks, have the same expectations, and even the same Amazon supervisors. And then finally, unionization efforts are undercut because the workforce is constantly changing. Even when Amazon employees that are hired temporarily are promised a full-time job, they're often let go within a few months. So shifting focus and looking for an example of someone else in the space who struggled with this issue, we arrived at Walmart, and they've been scrutinized for executing the same temporary employment tactics that Amazon has for even longer. More recently, however, they've turned over a new leaf, and as of January 31st this year, 740,000 of Walmart's 1.2 million hourly store workers are employed full-time. This is up 53% from 5 years ago. And not only does this mean greater job stability and benefits for a greater number of employees, but Walmart has also touted that it allowed them to attract and retain top talent that they otherwise wouldn't have. So essentially, Walmart's efforts prove that corporations of this size can always work to do better for employees while maintaining operational excellence. Looking at Amazon's mission statement, it reads as follows: "We strive to offer our customers the lowest possible prices, the best available selection, and the utmost convenience." And this all rings true to their business model, customer satisfaction, and delivering the best online shopping experience. But at the end of the day, there's no ethical responsibility or component to it And the only responsibility that is apparent is the responsibility to their profits and creating transactions. So based on our analysis and in our opinion, we are recommending the adoption of a human capital focused operation policy. And this could be achieved through the development of a triple bottom line strategy. Finally, the implementation of a new mission statement that incorporates this policy is a nice way to tie everything together. Again, looking to someone else to set the example, we arrived at Starbucks and their triple bottom line program. Starbucks is able to create business value with a framework that identifies responsibility not only to the financial performance of the corporation, but also to society and the environment. Starbucks actually places an emphasis on purchasing coffee that is harvested under humane conditions and in a sustainable manner, and they offer comprehensive benefits for both full-time and part-time employees. So from the farm all the way to the table where you get your coffee, Starbucks is making sure to take care of all of their workers in the best ways that they can. Amazon has pledged to put funds to the environment. For example, they're looking to go net carbon zero by 2040, but they haven't devoted the same resources that others have to their workers.
As we
Now I'm
have
going to hand it over to Emma to talk about Starbucks and Walmart's financials and the feasibility of these models.
Thank you. As we have just mentioned, two different examples of corporations who have taken that step in devoting extra resources and energy to their employees. We wanted to look at their financials to help bolster our argument to you, the board, that this is something that is feasible for Amazon to take on as well. First, looking at Starbucks. Obviously, again, to note from fiscal year 2020 to 2021, those really high growth numbers are an adjustment from the decrease that they experienced during the pandemic, just something to note. However, if you look from 2020 to current, there has been growth in revenue and the operating margin and that return on invested capital. And just to think, Starbucks implemented their triple bottom line strategy back in 2001. So if you think of where they started or where they were at from a business standpoint at that point and where they have grown to now fiscally, it is really amazing to see that growth and that they've been able to prioritize their financial performance alongside looking at those pieces that incorporate the community and those employees as well. Next, looking at Walmart, they took action more recently, so we really wanted to focus on that current piece since this move took place in the beginning of 2022. Looking at that, we have seen pretty stable revenue and operating margin has stayed consistent. And then for return on invested capital, we actually have seen an increase in that. And this to us just says that, you know, that implementation and increased investment in employees does not take away from their financial success. And both of these really do provide proof that, you know, again, investing in your employees does not have to negatively affect that financial standing, and that it reiterates that Amazon does have the financial wherewithal to spend more on their employees, and it is a very urgent and paramount matter that they do so and take advice from our solutions. I'll hand it back to Brian to discuss our new mission statement.
Finally, after revising the mission statement, it reads as follows. We strive to offer our customers the lowest possible prices, the best available selection, and the utmost convenience, all while innovating on sustainable fronts and putting our people at the core of all business decisions. This alteration rings true to the triple bottom line policy, fulfilling responsibilities not only to the financial components of the business, but also to society and to Amazon's workers. Thank you so much for your time today, and we are happy to answer any and all questions that you have.
I'll go ahead and begin. First of all, thanks for coming in. Thanks for your presentation, and thanks for the effort. And in particular, your initiative to research some key parts of our operation. First of all, I will appreciate you understand Amazon is a labor-intensive operation and business. And in particular, being a U.S.-based company, we are competing and operating in a relatively high-cost labor market. How is Amazon considering how we structure our operation in the context of operating in a high labor cost market or environment here in the U.S.? Are there any lessons available from your operations in other parts of the world, Western Europe, for example, which certainly is an environment that is more where labor unions and organized labor is more prevalent? Any lessons available or things that we could be doing in the U.S. different from or similar to what's being done in Europe or other parts of the world where Amazon operates?
While we have not looked specifically at what we are doing in Europe per se, what we did consider heavily is not competitors from a standpoint of what Amazon is doing, but the competitors of our potential employee base. So potential employees of Amazon may also be looking to go work at Target, at Walmart, and specifically with Target, they are offering a lot of benefits for their employees, inciting things such as tuition assistance, minimum wages higher than that required at the state level. So just looking within the US of those that we compete with for that potential employee base, which, as we are all aware, fighting for employees right now has been very difficult, as it has been underemployment across the board. So it's really important to look at that and justify it in that sense of our other competitors in that sense, and what they're offering the potential employee base, and how we may lose some of our potential employees that are a crucial element of our operations as we continue to grow as a business.
Thank you. One of the things I better understand is this has been the first occasion this group in is it New York, where the organized labor initiative has been successful in Staten Island specifically. Why have previous organized labor initiatives not been successful? What's different about New York?
I know that we specifically had one specific area was the Atlanta one. Max, if you want to talk a bit more about your research on the thwarted Atlanta efforts.
Okay. Do any of the other team members, are they aware of why other organized labor initiatives were not successful?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to jump in there, Emma. The workers were not able to successfully unionize. There wasn't really much detail in the research of why they were not able to. I know Amazon has been striving away from organized unions. In fact, as Emma mentioned, paying money to persuade their employees not to union. I know the Bezos and the CEO said it's not necessary for their employees to unionize. So Amazon is encouraging their employees not to unionize. They don't feel as though it is necessary to do so.
Okay, thank you. How about some of the other judges' questions for the group?
This is Alison. I have a question if I can. Fine, so I've just been able to start my video again so you can see me. Gallery view, that's better. I'm curious, I really liked your presentation. I learned a lot, and I thought you had a great structure about the legal, the finance, and the ethical challenges that we face. But we've just come through 2 years of pandemic, and I wondered how much you could take that into account in terms of where we are and what we are doing. Our business clearly was going to grow during the pandemic because we were one of the few places with a very active online business for shopping, whereas Target and Walmart, had challenges even keeping their stores open at certain points. So I'm curious as to how much you believe that some of this and some of these differences are due to the different businesses that we actually have than Target and Walmart.
I definitely see the pandemic as a catalyst for the inevitable change in consumer trends when it comes to retail experiences. Although we've been shifting over the past decade towards more and more people shopping online every day, I think that the pandemic really forced those who were a little hesitant about those movements to take that step and get that Prime membership and start increasing the amount that they were ordering online. And with that, that definitely has adjusted the terminal growth rate for Amazon's business as we continue to see more and more revenue growth year over year. And we don't think that this consumer trend will end anytime soon, even as consumers do continue to return to those in-store shopping experiences. So we feel as that strengthens our argument as people will continue to support Amazon. It's really important that we think about those consumers who are conscious about the ethical decisions that they're making and that they don't switch to another e-commerce retailer and really stay with Amazon during this time. And that it's really, again, paramount that we make these changes and address the ethical lapses so that we can continue to succeed.
And I would just like to further add on to Emma's point about that. The pandemic has definitely been great for business, but it's also important to note that a lot of these, especially looking into the legal issues, they have been prevalent for even previously before the pandemic, looking at the culture and labor violations. I think because Amazon has grown out of the pandemic as a bigger business, it's important to note, all eyes are on like them right now. And so it's just important to see that we really need to change these issues. And they've been going on for way too many years, and sexual and verbal harassment within the workplace, this culture that's not great for employees, that just doesn't happen overnight or over the span of 2 years. This is a very deep-rooted issue that has gone on for way too long.
Yeah, I appreciate your perspective. It's good. Thank you.
Yeah, and then just one more thing that I'd like to add to that. This growth during the pandemic was built on the backbone of those workers. They were able to deliver, and that's why Amazon was so successful. So because they were able to keep up with the times and Amazon still wasn't even meeting those basic legal requirements to them, how is it possible that they could be fulfilling ethical responsibility to the people that made them so successful?
And also, worker safety and worker treatment is not something that started to deteriorate as the pandemic began or throughout the pandemic. It's important to note that in 2019, when the Amazon workers walked out claiming inhumane conditions on Amazon Prime Day, this was 2019, this was before the pandemic, or any of the problems and the safety issues that came along with the pandemic. So I think the pandemic has snowballed these problems a little more, and maybe, like Emma said, added a catalyst, but they were definitely prevalent before, during, and even after the COVID-19 pandemic.
So Max, you just hit on what my question was going down the path toward, which is there was a slide, I believe, that put some of these legal or employment issues on the same slide as information about the company's growth. So what I wanted to ask about is exactly what you just touched on of, I know that some of these legal and employment issues have been there prior to the pandemic. So can you clarify what your point is about the company's success in these issues? Is it that as the company grows in success, it has additional responsibility to its employees, or as it grows, it should be having less of these issues? Because my thought as a business person is, as a company grows, they're hiring more workers. Of course, there will be more litigation. So to completely control for that by an inspirational mission, et cetera, I'm not so sure. And so I just want to ask that clarifying question of, can you bring me full circle on the growth of the company and the growth in these issues? Is some of that to be expected, or are you calling upon us to do something totally different because of the success?
Yes, and I think as the company grows and expands, you will see that turnover rate increase. I think that is to be expected. But to know 150% turnover rate where Amazon is encouraging and paying bonuses for employees to leave after 3 years, I think that shows almost a lack of respect to fulfillment workers, to warehouse workers, part-time employees, where yes, the company is growing, but at the same time, they're encouraging their workers to leave because they could hire them with what Bezos basically said is cheap labor, replacement labor. So yes, I think an increase in the turnover rate is to be expected as a company grows, but not in the exponential way that we've seen it grow in Amazon, especially compared to other companies and similar, like Walmart and other large companies who don't have this high turnover rate. Yeah, so I think part of it is to be explained, but then another larger part can be controlled by Amazon.
Just to jump in there, obviously there will always be false accusations and litigations on the part of employees, but we chose to highlight those that are of prime concern for the company and that are real issues. And we also feel as ethical responsibilities on the part of a company do not just come with growth and a large size. Any business person, regardless of if it is a small business in a hometown or one of the largest e-commerce giants on the globe, owe their employees the respect and ethical responsibility to be treating them fairly, providing a safe workplace and fair pay and compensation and that duty of care. So it's already an issue, and the fact that more employees, again, we are up to 1.6 million employees, and as that number continues to rise, there will continue to be more individuals who are affected. So while Amazon is in this stage of growth, it continues to be of a growing matter of importance and concern.
Yeah, and again, I think this all goes back to those 3 pillars of the triple bottom line strategy. You have the financials, which Amazon is already dedicated to taking care of. They've made pledges towards the environment and sustainability, but it's time that they shift focus to these issues and make it known that they do care about it. The thwarting of unionization efforts is a clear trend in the other direction. And overall, these problems will increase, but it's time for a change in attitude.
I'm going to jump in with my question. I had some concerns about the ethical part of this when it comes to duty. As a member of the board, I can acknowledge that part of why Amazon has been so successful is our commitment to the customer. It's about our loyalty and our care of that convenience that you all touched on. And so my concern in changing our company statement to having the employees be the core of all business decisions, the wording of that, I think, shifts our duty from the customer, perhaps to the employee, in a way that even I question what the ethics would be of prioritizing one over the other. So I guess my question is, why should we prioritize our employees over our customers if our entire foundation and our entire mission statement as a company and our success has been in being loyal to the customer? And surely there are ethical concerns there and how we care about our consumers and our customers.
Well, I think you got to think about it. I mean, today's customers can be tomorrow's employees. So you want to treat, everyone in a fair and equitable sense. To just rely on your customers on the backs of your employees certainly is not fair to your employees. Now, you want to compromise any services that you offer to your customers, but at the same time, you want to take into consideration of how you're treating your employees to deliver that service that the customers have been accustomed to over the last several years.
I also just want to add to Max's point about that. I think now more than ever, consumers are a little bit more conscious of where they purchase their items from and where they do their business. And so I think it's important taking advantage of this new consumer that is a little bit more aware of what goes on behind a business and where they're purchasing their products from. We want to let consumers know that we're also an ethical company. We care about our employees, and people are more willing to purchase now from places that care about their employees, the environment, taking these initiatives. And so we're trying to also attract the consumers that do care and how people are shifting their focus in terms of these companies.
Something else I'd like to add is just to really dwell on the magnitude of Amazon. When I live in New Jersey, and I remember a couple of years back, I believe in 2018, when there was talks about the new bid for an Amazon warehouse, and just how prevalent and frequent we were discussing in the classroom how much growth this would bring to our local area, as one of the requested locations was near my hometown. There's 1.6 million employees at Amazon. This number will continue to grow. And even if you don't work for Amazon, if your warehouse is in an area where you are living and residing, that impacts your local economy on the daily. Those local Amazon drivers working every day to bring you your packages impact your community, and their care and well-being impacts yours as well, even if you are not an employee for the company. So we really feel as if, to reiterate all the points we've mentioned so far, that the employees are at the core of the business, as they are also the consumers.
So I'd like to just ask a question based on that feedback. I agree with you that we should be paying more attention to taking care of our employees because they're what makes this business run. But putting wording like this in the mission statement, there could be conflicts between our mission to support our customers and a separate mission of supporting our employees. And I think legally we need to get some input on those two issues, because it's not clear to me that we can combine them. I mean, does Walmart put something similar in their mission statement, both customers and employees? Does Target?
I am not too familiar with the exact mission statements of both of those companies, but again, kind of to reiterate what Emma said, it's not necessarily a conflict of interest in this. I can see where it could be a conflict of interest, but our main point is just being at the bare minimum, doing what's right for our employees. And that's kind of the point that we want to drive home. It's, so that we can give them their minimum wage, potentially above that, like those other organizations, and follow suit in that sense. So I hope that kind of provides a little bit of more clarification.
I also have something to state. Walmart's mission statement actually reads, to save people money so they can live better. As I'm sure we're all familiar with the slogan in the commercials as well. That focus on living better is not just for their consumers. That living better, that element of enhancing one's life and focusing on ethical duties and responsibilities can be echoed. And while wordsmithing the mission statement is, that's up to debate. Obviously, there could be grammatical changes in the way we word it, but our real driving element is that it needs to be changed to focus and have that element on human capital and care for our employees, or for Amazon's employees, and just how they are really at the core. And, whether that's changing a word or two, but really focusing on that, having that element in there in some capacity is really being crucial.
I know Target was mentioned. Target has 5 key commitments that they build their company around. 2 of those have to deal with their team and the people specifically. One being having a happy, healthy, and valued team, and the second one being ethical business practices. And they have a whole code of ethics that the company follows. So 2 of their 5 key commitments deal with their people, their employees, and their ethical practices of their business.
Thank you.
Excellent feedback.
We're going to come out of the role-playing portion of this session. I want to have a chance to talk with the team. I'm going to go first, but then I'm going to ask the other judges to give feedback as well. Okay, first of all, a couple of things. You guys did a phenomenal job. I'll just say it right up front, and I'm going to nail a couple of things that I really liked about what you guys did. So, and I'm going to start because it's easy. It came right at the end. So the question was asked about, did you look at other companies? And first of all, I'm going to mispronounce your name. Is it Hele?
Hele, yes.
Hele, first of all, you did this twice during the presentation. Someone asked you a question you didn't know the answer to, and you said right up front, I don't know, or so forth. I love that, okay? I love that because I sit in presentations weekly and people don't answer questions. It drives me bonkers. And I tell my team all the time, before you do anything else, answer the person's question, whether you know it or not. So first of all, thank you for doing that. Please keep doing that throughout your career, even if it's not what the person who is asking the question wants to hear, number one. But number two, you came back and gave us a standard answer, but then Emma and Max both on and came right back behind you. You know, I don't know, you guys I'm sure are far quicker at looking at things than I can do. You guys rocked it. Keep that up. Back each other up. That will serve you well. That was really well done. I really like the contrast with Walmart and Starbucks. So I went to business school several years ago, and we read multiple cases on Starbucks and how they focused their balance on being a profitable business, being a successful business, how much more efficient and effective they are, for example, than Caribou. But you know, they put employee satisfaction, employee retention right up there with everything else, despite the fact, just like Amazon, you're a US-based company, you have to pay US wages, you have US labor laws to deal with, and so forth, okay? So great contrast in your choices of companies, not to mention the contrast with Walmart and how they've cleaned up their act and are working to do so. Really well done. So one of the things you guys did not mention was a Princeton grad, Jeff Bezos. And there's another Princeton grad in the room, and he may or may not know this, but Bezos is either the richest man in the world or number two these days. How the dickens can you be the richest man in the world and not be taking care of your employees? It's a rhetorical question, but it's remarkable, okay? By the way, Bezos and I were born in the same year, so okay? Made a couple of other great points at the end. I really like this again from Hule. So this is back to advocating for why Amazon needs to make changes. You hit on the contrast of generational differences, okay? And this is something, again, I learned a while ago. So much about what makes us different is not a function of where we're from or our family backgrounds or our cultural backgrounds. Those are all certainly factors, but simply a fact that we're parts of different generations, okay? Boomers think different than Generation X or Generation Y, and consequently we have blind spots. But your generation and the ones that are on either side of you, you are the ones with the power in this world, not the boomers who are retiring every day in the millions, okay? So keep that aware of what makes folks different and what consequently shapes our values and what's important to us, okay? That was really good. I love the contrast with Alibaba. I had no idea they were that big, really nice. I learned something today. Oh, by the way, you managed time really well today as well, okay? And finally, and I could keep going on, but I'm gonna put it in my feedback. Whoever looked at the 10K, either you have taken classes in accounting or you were particularly industrious to do so, but thank you for looking at the 10K because there's so much rich information in that. Please keep looking at company statements and sticking noses in it like they did with the mission statement. There's nothing in the mission statement about employees. It's very telling. Well done. We can talk more later if you'd like. I'd like to let Allison and the other judges share feedback also.
I too was impressed, and I could see people looking stuff up while I asked the question, and that's really good to have you with the ability to do that. I also like the fact that you'd worked from company documents, not from newspaper reports, because the newspapers do not give you a true picture. You know, bad stuff sells and good things don't. And if you want real information, you've got to go to some different sources. So I was very impressed with the sourcing of your information. And I also was impressed with the way you laid it out very clearly, the whole program, legal, financial, ethical, and sort of dealt with it as a problem and then dealt with the same three as here's a solution and a pathway forwards. So I also thought you were all very good. You weren't reading your slides or anything. You were well prepared and could talk based on the slides being there. And that's a skill that's essential to learn as a business person, because you can actually, I could read a slide faster than you can talk about it. So it's good to have you not parroting what's in a slide. So I was impressed with the presentation, the organization, and the way you presented as well. It was good.
Okay, I can jump in. So I'll add on to all the positives and say I also really like the benchmarking that you did. I find it persuasive when I hear what other companies are doing and how they're doing it well. So thank you for bringing that in. I liked how you really clearly had the mission on the slide. One thing I want to add, because full disclosure, I've worked at Amazon before. They do have leadership principles that are really important. And although they're not in the mission, they are used in hiring, and they do have, just so you can bring this forward maybe in the next presentations, they do have employee focus in some of those, including striving to be Earth's best employer. So just take a look at that and be sure you're at least referencing that as you go forward to supplement your conversation on the mission, though I understand why you focused on that, and nice work. Professional dress, appreciate you showing up with that. I want to add some constructive feedback as well, which has to do about the audience. So you talked a lot about Bezos. Bezos is on the board, right? So if you are speaking to the board, I would be phrasing that a little bit differently. And instead of using they, them, there for Amazon, that's we, as the board members, like we are part of it too, including Bezos. So just, it should be a pretty simple reorg to refer to that a little bit differently to make it more inclusive and aware of that audience. And then just wanted to say, like, putting myself in the shoes of a board member, at the beginning, there was talk about like the companies not meeting basic needs of employees and not meeting basic industry standards. My immediate reaction to that is on the defense. And maybe that's bad for me, and I need to work on that myself. But I think that there's a way to maybe deliver the message, but make it sort of like we've done all these great things, but this is still happening, or there's something more we could do, rather than saying like we're not meeting a baseline. I think it's warranted to call out. I'm just flagging kind of the language and like the receiving end on the board and how the board might feel with some of the phrasing. The only other thing I want to point out is with the lawsuits, you had a slide about other lawsuits that weren't employee related. I'd say just go all in, focus this conversation on employees only. Don't talk about the antitrust stuff, et cetera. My personal opinion, just kind of zero in on the employee side and let that be the focus. So that's my feedback. Last would be just bottom line on top. Bring what your proposal is going to be to the very start, so that rather than getting bogged down in all the issues, we know there's a bright spot of a solution coming. And I saw that in your little kind of cookie trail at the bottom there, that there was a solution coming, but like put that out there right at the start so that we know, okay, they're going to lay out the issue, but I also am going to know what the solution is. And as a board member, that will give me confidence. Thank you so much. You did a great job.
I don't know how I'm going to follow that because that was fantastic, Jessica. But yeah, I thought that the PowerPoint was one of the most polished presentations I've seen, just, in terms of sophistication, like, even silly things like color coding and the little map at the bottom, like it was just very easy to follow. You did a very thorough job on the financial and legal. So the other part that I thought was great was when almost everyone answered the ethical part of it, which you had amazing, like little bites of how saying like potential customers could become employees. Like that's a great line, I think, to remind Amazon of, that problem of the labor force kind of shrinking because they go through it so quickly with turnover, and saying local communities are also reflective of what's going on in the warehouses that are set up in different, states and communities. And then even thinking about how the consumer thinks about the value of the company. I really think you guys should go heavy on that, because I would say for your 10-minute and your 90, the ethics is the meat of the issue. And so perhaps outlining what ethical values the employees need from the employer in terms of well-being and safety, and highlighting why as a board member do I care about the safety, and tying in the humanity of it, the morality of it. And then I think it's really great to keep bringing up the consumer in terms of the ethics, because from a PR standpoint, all those lawsuits and all, all of those comparison points, they reflect badly on Amazon, on the board, if consumers don't want to purchase from Amazon. So all the numbers can paint a really great picture of how much Amazon grew in the pandemic. But if the consumer doesn't enjoy purchasing from Amazon because they have that bad PR representation in the media and in culture, I think that's more like that would, I think, ping on like the hearts of the board members and maybe on even like the audience of, oh, we should care because this is going to have a terrible long-term effect for our image, like maybe more on Amazon image. But really, I think the relay, which other judges have talked about, of answering the questions and just jumping immediately on like, let me add to that. That's one of the best ways to show you're well prepared, which you all were. So yeah, great presentation. I don't need to add anything else because my other judges have already done so. Thank you so much.
Great timing on everyone there. As the tech guy listening in, great job to the team as well. We do have a hard stop here. Our next team as a IBEC officials group is at 3:15, so unfortunately have to hop off a bit early. But please, you'll be receiving some feedback from all of the judges, and great job again, everyone.
Judges, please fill out your online forms so they can be compiled and the results can be shared with the group. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
I'd also remind you to please reach out to Tom for who will be presenting amongst your group tomorrow, in case you haven't already.
Yeah, thank you so much. Let me just do a little bit of this so you guys can feel accomplished. Great job.
Thanks, y'all.
So much for your time.
Good
Thank
luck
you.
for your time.